Why was she still here, hiding in a town that pretended not to see her? The morning fog clung to the Colorado River, a veil of silver that blurred the edges of the world. To most, it was peaceful. To her, it was a cover. She stood knee-deep in the water, still as a reed rifle balanced across her shoulder. The current lapped against her legs, carrying the cold bite of mountain snowmelt. Every ripple felt like a reminder, stay sharp, stay alive. She had been told once that snipers disappear into their environment, that the most dangerous position is the one no one notices until it's too late. That was her gift and her curse. Her name, at least to the people of River Point, was Katherine Reynolds, a quiet woman with auburn hair, mid-30s, renting a cabin by Sawyer's Creek, a wildlife photographer, or so she claimed. But the way she kept her back to the wall in diners, the way her eyes tracked exits, the way her body stilled when danger whispered through the air, it told another story. And the river knew. The river always knew. Katherine adjusted her stance, lowering herself so the water reached her waist. From a distance she might look like driftwood, half-submerged, unmoving, but her scope wasn't pointed at wildlife today. No osprey in the sky, no trout in the shallows. Her gaze was locked on the South Bend, a stretch of riverbank less than 2 miles away, where men had set up a cluster of trailers. Developers, they said. Condos, resorts, promises of jobs. But no developer she'd ever known carried themselves like these men did, shoulders squared, weapons close at hand even when disguised as survey equipment, boots that moved with the rhythm of men trained to kill. She'd watched them for 3 days, each morning from this exact position, chest deep in the river, patient, silent, invisible. Her camera bag on the bank did not hold just lenses and filters. Nestled between the compartments lay a Glock 19 with a threaded barrel. Beside it, a compact spotting scope that could read a face from half a mile away. She didn't need to fire. Not yet. She only needed to know. And what she knew so far was enough to twist her gut. The man they called Richard Coleman moved differently from the rest. Suits and polished shoes couldn't hide what he was. When he surveyed his men, it wasn't real estate he measured. It was terrain, choke points, vulnerabilities. She'd seen him before, years ago, in photographs her brother had sent her from Afghanistan. He hadn't called him Coleman then. He had called him Marcus Blackwood. The traitor. The man whose betrayal had gotten 4 SEALs killed, including her younger brother, David. She had buried the letter along with David's dog tags, but the words still echoed. My team leader says we can trust the liaison. He seems sharp, experienced, calls himself Blackwood. Jack says he's solid. But Blackwood hadn't been solid. He had sold them out, for money, for power, for something darker. Katherine clenched her jaw against the memory. She had joined naval intelligence to chase shadows, to find answers. What she hadn't expected was to find Blackwood here, in River Point, masquerading as a man of business. And he was looking for something. Her scope tracked the movements around his camp. Men unloading unmarked crates, diving gear stacked near the shoreline, a sonar screen flashing inside the trailer when the door cracked open. She didn't need confirmation to know what it meant. They weren't building condos. They were hunting. But what did the river hide that was worth this? The fog thinned as the sun lifted higher, painting the canyon walls in fire. Katherine pulled her rifle closer, the metal slick with condensation. She didn't raise it, not yet. A sniper's power wasn't in the bullet. It was in the silence before it, in the patience. She stayed until her body trembled from the cold, until the camp settled back into its rhythm, until Coleman, Blackwood, disappeared inside his command trailer. Only then did she retreat, moving slowly, careful not to disturb the water more than a fish might. She crawled onto the bank, stripped off her wet outer layer, and tucked the rifle back into its case. Her walk to the cabin was long, deliberate. To anyone who saw, she was just a photographer returning from a morning shoot, her camera slung across her chest. But every step was measured, every sound catalogued. She didn't believe in safe ground, not anymore. Inside the cabin, she set her gear down and locked the door. Then she opened the folder she kept hidden beneath the floorboards: photographs, satellite images, a redacted mission report from 1968. Her brother. Her brother tattoo replicated in ink on her wrist, dots and dashes, Morse code, D.H. David Harper. She traced it with her thumb, the way she had when grief first hardened into resolve. Sometimes she wondered if her brother would even recognize her now. She was colder, harder, but she was still his sister, and his ghost still followed her into every silence. The folder's final page was the one that haunted her most, a field report stamped Operation Broken Arrow, 1968. The words burned even through the black bars of censorship. A tactical nuclear device lost during transport along the Colorado River, officially recovered, unofficially never found. Her contact inside ONI had whispered the truth months ago. Survivors of the transport had hidden the weapon, convinced their superiors couldn't be trusted. For 50 years it had rested beneath this river, a relic, dormant but alive, and Blackwood was here to dig it out. Katherine closed the folder and leaned back in the chair. The cabin was small, quiet, almost homey. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the counter. A jacket draped over the chair as if she had been a normal woman with normal mornings. She hated the lie. She hated how convincing she had become at playing it. Her eyes flicked to the Glock on the table. She told herself she carried it for protection, but deep down she knew the truth. It was for him, Blackwood. If she ever got the chance, she would put one round through the man's skull, no hesitation. But vengeance wasn't her mission, not officially. Her comms device crackled once, faint, a signal routed through layers of encrypted relay. She picked it up, her voice low. "Harper." A pause, a man's voice answered, calm, rough, the kind of voice that had been built on orders. "You're running unsanctioned." She didn't flinch. "You think ONI would clear this? They'd bury it. They've buried it for 50 years. Another pause, then, "What's the status?" "Coleman is Blackwood. He's here with a private army. They've got sonar rigs and divers. They know about the weapon, even if they don't have exact coordinates." "Extraction team." "Too slow," Katherine whispered. "He's moving now. If he finds it, it's gone. We'll never get it back." The line hissed, then silence. Whoever her contact was, he wasn't going to argue. He never did. He trusted her maybe too much. When the signal died, the cabin felt emptier than before. She rubbed her temples. A sniper could wait for hours without moving, without food, without thought. But waiting for allies who never came, that was the weight that broke people. Her breath caught when she heard the crunch of gravel outside. Someone was on her trail. Quiet, skilled. She drew her Glock, thumb flicking the safety down in one practiced motion. The air changed in the room. Every nerve in her body lit up. A shadow crossed the window. She ducked into the blind spot beside the door, gun raised, heartbeat steady. She had trained for this her whole life. Stay calm, read the rhythm, strike when ready. The doorknob twitched. She didn't wait. She pivoted, aimed, and in the same heartbeat the door swung open, revealing a man she hadn't seen in years. Gray hair, scar across his shoulder, eyes that were too sharp to belong to a fisherman. He didn't flinch at the gun in his face. He only said one word. "Ghost." Katherine's grip faltered for just an instant. She knew the name, a call sign, a legend whispered about in her brother's letters. "Jack Harlow," she said. He nodded once, slowly, as if to confirm the past had truly stepped into her present. And for the first time in years, Katherine felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Not fear, not grief. Hope. But she didn't lower her weapon, not yet. Because if Ghost was here, then everything she thought she had prepared for was about to change. Why hadn't she pulled the trigger? That question echoed in Katherine's mind as she kept the Glock leveled at Jack Harlow's chest. The morning light bled through the cracks of her cabin shutters, cutting harsh lines across his weathered face. He looked older than the photographs her brother had once sent. Creased skin, silver hair, the kind of weight only carried by men who had outlived their wars. He didn't look surprised to see her, and that unsettled her most. "Put it down," he said softly, his voice measured. Not a command, not quite a plea. Just calm, steady, the voice of someone who had walked through fire so often he'd forgotten the meaning of fear. Katherine didn't move. "Why are you here?" "Same reason you are," he replied. "The river." Her breath caught, he knew, or at least enough to be dangerous. She studied him, every twitch, every hesitation. There was none. He was still as stone. "You're supposed to be dead," she said, the Glock unwavering. "Dead men fish better," Jack murmured, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Less gossip that way." Her finger tightened on the trigger. The urge to fire burned in her chest. Her brother had written about this man. David had admired him, trusted him. And yet David was dead. Jack had survived. Survivors were always suspicious. "Helmand Province," she said coldly. "You led that team, my brother." "I know," Jack interrupted, his eyes shadowed. "I carried him down that mountain, carried him until my own lungs collapsed." His voice dipped lower, waited. "Don't think a day has passed I haven't heard his name." Silence. Her hands shook, but not from fear, from the war between memory and rage. Finally, she lowered the weapon just enough. "Then you know who Coleman really is." Jack's gaze sharpened. "Blackwood." The word hung in the air like a curse. Neither of them wanted to speak, but both knew too well. Katherine holstered the Glock but didn't step back. She didn't trust him. Not yet. He's here with a private army. They've set up sonar, divers, patrols. He's looking for something under the river. Jack didn't ask what, he already knew. "The old rumors," he muttered. "Broken arrow." Her chest tightened. "So you've heard." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, posture deceptively casual. But she could see his eyes scanning her maps, her folders, her gear laid out too precisely to be the tools of a tourist. He was cataloging her, assessing, just as she had done with him. "You're running this alone?" he asked. "I don't need help." "You will," Jack replied. "Blackwood, not playing with amateurs. I counted his men, Spetsnaz or ex-Spetsnaz. You've got a dozen trained killers on your riverbank, and that's just what you can see. He's building for something bigger." She bristled. "You think I don't know that?" "I think you're stubborn enough to get yourself killed before you finish the job," Jack countered. His tone wasn't cruel, it was flat, like the simple statement of gravity. Her jaw clenched. "You disappeared for 20 years. Now you come back, play the ghost, and expect me to fall in line." "No," he said quietly. "I expect you to decide if this is about revenge or survival." The words cut deeper than she expected. Because he was right. Her brother's face, Blackwood's betrayal, they weren't strategy. They were wounds, and wounds got people killed. She turned away, packing to the window, staring out at the river. Blackwood doesn't just want the weapon. He wants to sell it. 15 pounds of enriched uranium in the hands of the highest bidder. You know what that means. Jack's voice was grim. It means someone lights up a city, and the world never looks the same again. Her throat tightened. For weeks she had carried this truth alone, waiting for orders that never came, for backup that never arrived. And now here stood the only man who might understand. The only man who had lost as much as she had. Katherine turned back, meeting his eyes. "Then help me." Jack studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a single nod. "My terrain, my rules." Something shifted inside her chest. Not trust, not yet, but something close. That evening they hiked together to the ridge above the South Bend. The river stretched wide and black beneath the canyon walls, the current reflecting slivers of moonlight. From their vantage point, the camp looked small, almost insignificant, but Katherine felt the weight of what it concealed. Jack crouched low, binoculars in hand. "Count them." She adjusted her scope. 8 visible, 2 on patrol, 4 at the trailers, 2 on the dock. And Coleman. She found him in the glow of the largest trailer, silver hair gleaming under fluorescent light. There, her stomach twisted. He looked untouchable, almost civilized. A businessman, a liar. Jack followed her line of sight, his jaw tightening. That's him. "Do you believe me now?" she asked softly. "I believed you before," Jack replied. His voice was distant, heavy. "I just didn't want to." They watched in silence. Men moved with practiced rhythm, not the shuffle of civilians. Katherine tracked one who adjusted his rifle strap without thinking, the ease of a man who had carried it for years. Another rotated through perimeter points with precision. No, these weren't contractors. These were soldiers, ghosts of other nations' wars. "They'll start diving soon," Jack murmured. "Sonar rigs mean they've narrowed it to the riverbed." Katherine's pulse quickened. "We have to get there first." Jack's gaze slid to her. "We." She didn't flinch. "You know the terrain, I have the intelligence. You want to stop Blackwood, then it's both of us." He held her stare, then slowly he nodded. But even as they sealed that fragile pact, Katherine's mind whispered the question she didn't dare voice. If it came down to it, her life or his, would she be willing to let him fall to save the mission? And deep down she feared the answer. Why was she trembling when she had done this 100 times before? The rifle lay across Katherine's lap, balanced with the same steady weight she had carried in countless training drills. Her cheek rested against the cool steel, her eye pressed to the scope. The South Bend camp swam into view, every detail sharp under the moon's reflection. The distance was perfect for a shot. Too perfect. But tonight wasn't about shooting, not yet. Beside her, Jack Harlow adjusted his binoculars. He didn't speak. He hadn't spoken much since their pact. Just the occasional short command, the clipped tone of a man who lived in tactical silence. She wondered if that was how her brother had seen him in Afghanistan, distant, unreadable, a ghost of a man wrapped in mission-first resolve. She wanted to hate him for it, and yet she envied the calm in his stillness. "Eyes right," Jack whispered suddenly. Katherine shifted her scope. A new truck had pulled into camp, headlights briefly cutting across the riverbank before going dark. 3 men stepped out, Eastern European by the look, their movements taut, military. One carried a case, heavy, reinforced. "What is it?" she asked. Jack didn't answer immediately. He watched the exchange as the men carried the case into the largest trailer where Blackwood waited. Only when the door shut did he exhale. Explosives. Shaped charges, maybe. They're prepping for underwater work. Katherine's stomach tightened. They'll use them to clear the riverbed. Jack nodded grimly, which means they're close, closer than we thought. Her finger twitched against the rifle's trigger guard. One shot. That's all it would take. Through the scope she had a perfect line on the guard outside the trailer. Then another. Then Coleman himself if he stepped into view. 3 shots, 3 bodies. Blackwood's operation fractured before it began. Her breath slowed instinctively, the sniper's rhythm returning. Inhale, exhale, squeeze. "Don't," Jack murmured without looking at her. Her muscles tensed. "He's right there, I can." "You fire, they scatter," he cut in. "They go to ground, tighten security, accelerate the search. You want to stop him. You don't break his machine, you bleed it slow, make him doubt his own shadow." She forced herself to ease off the trigger. He was right, damn him. Revenge was loud, survival was quiet. Still, her chest ached with the weight of restraint. They stayed for hours cataloging movements, patrol rotations, guard positions, when men smoked, when they laughed, when they grew careless. Katherine recorded everything, her notes meticulous. Jack was the same, though his observations ran deeper, terrain weaknesses, choke points, blind angles in the security lights. It was almost comfortable, like sliding into an old rhythm she hadn't realized she'd been missing. But then Jack said something that made her blood run cold. "They'll find it in days, maybe less." Katherine turned to him sharply. "Then we move first." Not yet, he said. She almost snapped. What are you waiting for? He lowered his binoculars, and for the first time that night, he met her eyes. His voice was low, steady, but heavy with something deeper. I'm waiting for you to decide if you're here to kill one man or to save millions. The words struck her harder than any gunshot, because he was right, again. Her brother's ghost wanted vengeance. The world demanded more. She looked back through the scope, where Coleman stood briefly in the trailer doorway, silver hair catching the moonlight. He looked untouchable, as calm as if he were already certain of victory. Her hand trembled again, not from fear, from the impossible weight of choosing. Later that night, back at her cabin, Katherine couldn't sleep. The silence pressed on her like water, filling her lungs with memory. She saw David's grin, his reckless letters full of pride. Ghost says I'm ready for anything. You, laughed Kate, the way he trains us, like every mission's already life or death. David had believed in Jack, and David had died under Jack's command. She stared at Jack now, sitting across from her at the table, quietly cleaning a sidearm. His movements were methodical, efficient, almost reverent. No wasted motion, no wasted words. You blame yourself, she said suddenly. His hand stilled, always. Good, she replied sharply, the bitterness surprising even herself. But Jack didn't rise to it. He set the weapon down gently and looked at her with eyes that seemed older than the war itself. Blame doesn't bring them back. It just keeps you from saving the next ones. Her throat tightened. She hated him for his calm, for the way he spoke truths she didn't want to hear. But she also hated herself for needing him here. Before she could answer, a sound broke the silence. Not the wind, not the river, a crunch of gravel outside. Jack's hand moved instantly, silencer in place, eyes to the door. Katherine slid beside him, her Glock raised. They exchanged no words, only a glance, the kind of unspoken language only those who had lived in shadows understood. The door creaked. A figure stepped inside, broad-shouldered, massive, moving with deliberate slowness. Jack's weapon rose, and then dropped. Took you long enough, the man said gruffly, tossing a duffel bag onto the floor. Coffee's cold. Katherine blinked. Jack actually smiled. Mike, he said simply. The man grinned, scarred and bulldog strong. Guess retirement over. Katherine's stomach twisted. Whoever this Mike was, he carried himself like a wrecking ball with training. Another ghost from Jack's past, now stepping into her fragile mission. And suddenly, the river felt smaller. Because ghosts, she realized, had a way of multiplying when you least expected. Why did ghosts always arrive when you least wanted them? Katherine sat rigid in her chair, Glock still loose in her grip, eyes fixed on the newcomer. Mike dropped heavily into the seat opposite her as if the cabin were his own. The floorboards groaned under his weight. He smelled faintly of tobacco and dust, like a man carved out of old battlefields. Jack leaned back, arms crossed, that unreadable calm still painted across his face. Katherine hated that calm. She hated the way it made her feel like she was the only one wound tight enough to break. Care to explain? She asked sharply. Jack gestured at Mike. Former SEAL, same unit as me, same war, still breathin' because he's too stubborn to die. Mike grinned, teeth like weathered stone, and because ghost never misses. Katherine didn't smile. I didn't ask for more ghosts. No one ever does, Jack murmured. Mike chuckled at that, then leaned forward, forearms thick as tree trunks pressing into the table. I hear you're Harper's sister. The words struck like shrapnel. Her hand stiffened on the Glock, her heart skipping. You knew him. Mike's grin faded. For the first time his face softened and it made him look older. Knew him, fought beside him, carried him on my shoulders when his boots gave out. He was the kid who kept us laughing when everything else was broken. He was family. Katherine swallowed hard. She wanted to demand why family hadn't been enough to keep him alive. But the weight in Mike's eyes stopped her. It wasn't pity. It was grief buried deep and carried far. She holstered the Glock slowly. "Then you know why I'm here." Mike nodded once. "Revenge." Her jaw tightened. "Justice." The silence hung heavy. Then Jack broke it. "Enough." His voice cut through like a blade. "Blackwood isn't waiting, neither can we." By dawn, the three of them were moving downriver, packs strapped tight, weapons hidden under tarps. They traveled quiet, a small aluminum skiff gliding along the current. Katherine sat at the bow, eyes scanning the canyon walls, rifle across her lap. Jack steered with practiced ease, while Mike cleaned a blade with almost meditative focus. The silence between them wasn't comfortable. It was taut, stretched, like a wire waiting to snap. Katherine didn't know if she could trust them, not truly, but the river left no room for hesitation. "Blackwood's divers will hit the lower bend by nightfall," Jack finally said. "That's where the current slows, the silt builds. Perfect hiding spot for something heavy." Katherine studied the map pinned to her lap. "If the device is there, we need eyes before they get wet." Mike grunted. "So we beat 'em to the punch." "Not with 3 rifles and a boat," Jack replied. "We scout, we sabotage, make their search harder, longer, buy ourselves time." Katherine bristled. "Time isn't going to stop a nuclear device." "No," Jack said, "but it'll give us a chance to move it first." Her chest tightened. The thought of touching that relic, that sleeping monster beneath the river, made her stomach turn, but leaving it to Blackwood wasn't an option. Mike broke the silence. "So, Harper, you ever pulled a man out of a river with a knife in your teeth?" Katherine shot him a look. "No, but I've put one in a man's throat at 200 yards. His eyebrows lifted. Then he laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled her. "Guess Ghost wasn't lying. You really are Harper's blood." Something twisted in her chest at the name. Blood, family, ghosts again, always ghosts. They made camp near the canyon edge, far enough to stay unseen but close enough to hear faint echoes of Blackwood's men below. The sound of drills, muffled voices, the clang of metal against stone. The hunt had begun. Katherine lay prone, scope trained on the camp. She watched as divers suited up, black neoprene slick under floodlights. Tanks lined the dock. Coleman, Blackwood, stood at the edge, his hands clasped behind his back, every inch the commander. Her breath slowed. She lined up her scope on his head. One squeeze. The thought pulsed through her veins. One squeeze and David's ghost could rest. "Don't," Jack said quietly beside her. She hadn't realized her finger had found the trigger. "You think I can't make the shot?" she whispered. "I know you can," Jack said. "That's why you can't." Her throat tightened. "Then when?" "When the shot matters more than your anger." She wanted to scream. Instead, she pulled back from the scope, every muscle burning with restraint. Mike muttered under his breath. "He's right, kid. Kill Blackwood now and someone worse steps up. You take his army apart piece by piece. You break the man inside out." She hated that they were right. Hated it because it meant waiting. Waiting meant drowning in her own grief. That night they moved closer. Silent shadows on the ridge, creeping down through brush and stone until the camp lay just a few hundred yards away. The men were loud now, music playing from a radio, divers laughing as they stripped gear, the kind of careless confidence that came with control. Jack signaled. Mike moved first, slipping like a bear through the dark. Katherine followed, rifle slung across her back, Glock drawn. Her heartbeat was steady, her breathing calm, every nerve alive. They reached the outer perimeter, crates stacked high, fuel drums, equipment tents. Jack motioned and they split. Katherine slid into the shadows of the dock, the smell of oil and wet neoprene thick in the air. She crouched low, hands working quick. A knife through a fuel line. A tracker slid under a crate. A silencer against a radio tower's wire. Every motion was precise, silent sabotage. Then she froze. A voice low, close. "Thought I heard something." A beam of light swept past, inches from her face. Her finger found the Glock's trigger. The guard's boots crunched closer, 10 feet, 7, 5. Katherine's breath caught. One move and the silence of the canyon would shatter. And then, a shadow moved behind the guard. A hand clamped over his mouth. A knife whispered across his throat. The man crumpled soundlessly, dragged into darkness. Mike's eyes met hers for a brief moment, glinting under starlight. No words, just a nod. Katherine's stomach churned. She had killed before. She had pulled the trigger at impossible distances. But this was different, personal, quiet, hands-on. She wasn't sure if she admired Mike for it or feared him. By dawn, they had slipped back to the ridge unseen. Blackwood's men moved as if nothing had changed, but fuel tanks leaked. Communications were down, and hidden trackers now whispered secrets back to Katherine's encrypted receiver. They were still alive, still ahead. But Katherine lay awake as the sun rose, staring at the sky, the weight of Mike's silent kill pressing on her chest. Because she knew one thing. Sooner or later, the river would demand blood of her too. Why did the river always feel hungrier at night? The canyon swallowed sound, the water whispering against stone as if it were carrying secrets downstream. Katherine lay prone on the ridge, cheek pressed to her rifle stock, scope trained on the glow of floodlights below. Blackwood's camp had changed. The easy rhythm of laughter and cigarettes was gone. Now it pulsed with urgency. The divers were in the water. Two black silhouettes slipped beneath the surface, tanks glinting under the lights, ropes tethered to the dock. On shore, men moved with practiced efficiency, marking depth charts, logging sonar returns, hauling gear. And at the center, Richard Coleman, Marcus Blackwood, stood watching. Katherine's stomach twisted. He looked calm, always calm. A man who had betrayed his country, sold out soldiers and vanished into shadows, now commanding from the banks of her river. Her finger drifted to the trigger. She could almost hear David's voice. "One shot, Kate, that's all it takes." But Jack's words echoed louder. "Don't break the machine, bleed it slow." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She forced her breathing into rhythm, the sniper's prayer. Inhale, exhale, squeeze. Her scope followed Blackwood's head as he turned, silver hair gleaming in the floodlight. The shot was clean, the distance perfect. And yet she didn't fire. Beside her, Jack's voice was a low whisper, "Not yet." Her hands trembled, not from fear, from the war between what she wanted and what the mission demanded. "Talk to me," she whispered back. "They're searching grids," Jack said, binoculars steady. "Notice the markers. They've narrowed it. The trackers you planted, those crates are moving closer to the lower bend." Katherine adjusted her focus. Sure enough, equipment was being dragged toward the far dock. The sonar rig hummed faintly, its screen pulsing with returns. "They're close," she murmured. "Too close," Mike added from behind them, his voice like gravel. He chewed on a blade of dry grass, eyes scanning the scene below. "We let 'em keep digging, they'll find it before sunrise." Katherine's chest tightened. "Then we stop them tonight." Jack didn't answer immediately. He studied her, weighing something she couldn't read. Finally, he said, "You're the rifle, you make the call." The weight of the world seemed to fall on her shoulders in that instant. One decision, one squeeze, could fracture everything. Too soon, and the operation scattered. Too late, and the river surrendered its secret to Blackwood. Her eye pressed tighter to the scope. She watched the divers vanish into the dark current. The dock guards shifted, rifles slung lazily, unaware of how close death perched above them. She could take them all. 3 shots before the rest even knew where it came from. But this wasn't a sniper's war. This was a river's war, and rivers required patience. Her jaw clenched. "Not yet," she whispered. Jack gave the smallest nod. Mike muttered something under his breath but didn't argue. Hours bled into each other. The divers surfaced, shivering, voices clipped. Katherine adjusted her scope to read their lips, a skill drilled into her years ago. "Nothing. Move the grid. Silt too thick." Blackwood's jaw tightened as he listened. He gave no outburst, no anger, just a simple gesture with his hand, and the divers nodded, readying themselves to plunge again. Katherine exhaled. Not tonight, not yet. But she knew dawn would bring them closer. Back at the cabin, the tension cracked. "You had the shot," Mike growled, packing the small room like a caged animal. "I saw it. Coleman's head lit up like a damn lantern, and you froze." "I didn't freeze," Katherine snapped, heat rising in her chest. "Looked like freezing to me." She slammed the rifle onto the table, her voice sharp as glass. "If I'd taken it, we'd be running for our lives right now. You want to fight a dozen ex-Spetsnaz in their camp. Be my guest." Mike glared, his hands balled into fists. But before he could answer, Jack's voice cut through, low and calm. She was right. Both turned to him. He hadn't moved from the corner, arms crossed, watching like a judge in silent trial. "Blackwood alive means Blackwood overconfident," Jack continued. "He keeps them searching. That buys us time. If she'd killed him, we'd have chaos, and chaos doesn't give you hours. It gives you minutes." Mike shook his head. "And what happens when those divers come up with something solid, when they drag that bomb out of the mud?" Jack looked at Katherine. "Then we move together." The word caught her off guard, together. She wasn't used to it. For months she had worked alone, shadows her only allies. Now here were two men, ghosts of her brother's past, forcing their way into her fight. She wanted to hate it, but a small, buried part of her didn't. The next night, Katherine returned to the river alone. She told herself it was for clarity, for space. But deep down, she knew she needed to remember who she was without Ghost and Mike at her side. The fog was thick, clinging low, muffling sound. She slid into the water, body half submerged, rifle wrapped tight in waterproof casing. Every movement was slow, deliberate. The river accepted her, cloaking her in its silence. Through the reeds she watched the dock. Men smoked. The sonar hummed. Blackwood stood at the edge again, his presence like a shadow cast too far. Her finger brushed the trigger. The urge returned, fierce and raw. "David deserves this," her mind whispered. "The world deserves this." But then she saw something that froze her blood. A diver surfaced, dragging something metallic behind him. Heavy, rectangular, covered in silt. Katherine's heart slammed against her ribs. They had found it. The camp erupted in motion. Men rushed to the dock, voices sharp, urgent. The object was hauled onto planks, water spilling off its rusted shell. Even from her distance, Katherine could see the faded stenciling on its side. U.S. Army, 1968. The lost weapon was real, and it was awake. Her breath came fast. This was it. The moment. Her rifle lined up with Blackwood's chest as he stepped forward, hand brushing reverently against the relic. One squeeze. She could end him, maybe scatter the operation, maybe even stop the sale before it began. But Jack's voice haunted her still. "When the shot matters more than your anger." Her finger curled, her pulse steadied. And then Blackwood looked up. Not at her, at the ridge above. His eyes narrowed, sharp as knives, scanning the darkness. He knew. Katherine froze, the rifle suddenly heavy in her hands. The camp tightened, men moving faster, guards lifting rifles. Spotlights arced across the canyon, sweeping dangerously close to where she hid. Her cover was burning away. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the river, "One shot or nothing." The crosshairs hovered over Blackwood's heart. And she knew, whatever she chose now, nothing would ever be the same again. Why did time always slow when the crosshairs lined up? Katherine's breath thinned into silence, her heartbeat drumming against the steel pressed to her cheek. Blackwood stood in her scope, floodlight carving silver into his hair, hand resting on the rusted shell of the weapon they had dragged from the river. He looked untouchable. He looked like victory carved into a man's skin. Her finger pressed the trigger. The weight of years, of David's ghost, of every letter she'd buried, sat heavy on that squeeze. And then she fired. The rifle bucked softly against her shoulder, suppressed shot cracking into the night. The round cut clean through the air, perfect aim, perfect distance. But it didn't kill him. Blackwood staggered back, shoulder snapping crimson as the bullet tore through flesh. He fell against the dock, men rushing to shield him, shouts splitting the canyon. Katherine's chest froze, not dead, wounded. The second shot was ready. She realigned, scope steady, exhale sharp. But before she could fire, a spotlight flared across the ridge, blinding her. A guard had spotted the muzzle flash. Gunfire cracked up toward her position, rounds shredding stone, sparks dancing in the dark. "Move," Jack's voice bellowed from somewhere behind. Katherine rolled, the dirt spraying as bullets chased her shadow. Her rifle slammed against her back as she sprinted low across the ridge. The canyon roared with chaos, shouts in Russian, orders barked, engines revving. The quiet hunt was gone. The war had begun. They regrouped in the skiff half a mile upstream, breath ragged, water slapping against aluminum as Jack gunned the motor. Mike sat in the stern, firing bursts from his carbine into the dark canyon to cover their retreat. Katherine crouched low, rifle across her knees, hands trembling. She had fired, she had finally pulled the trigger, but not enough. "You hit him," Jack shouted over the motor. "Not dead," Katherine spat, voice sharp. "I should have killed him." "You broke his machine," Jack said flatly. "That's better." She wanted to argue, to scream that better wasn't enough, but the fire in her chest drowned the words. David's ghost wasn't satisfied. Neither was she. "Think they'll chase?" Mike growled, slamming a fresh mag into his weapon. "Not far," Jack answered. "Blackwood's bleeding. They'll circle wagons around him. That gives us time." Katherine stared at the dark water, her reflection fractured by the current. For the first time since she'd arrived in River Point, the sniper in her chest felt alive again, and it terrified her. Back at the cabin, they lit nothing. No lanterns, no fire, just silence and shadows. Mike leaned against the wall, stripping his weapon with restless hands. Jack sat at the table, sketching maps in the dark, his pencil scratching against paper. Katherine paced, unable to still herself. "He knows," she whispered finally. "He looked right at me. He knows I'm here." "Good," Jack said without glancing up. Her head snapped toward him. "Good. Means he's afraid." "He won't be afraid," Katherine snapped. "He'll be angry. He'll come harder." Jack finally lifted his eyes, calm and cold. "That's what we want. Anger blinds men, makes them sloppy. You saw him tonight. Untouchable. Now he knows he can bleed." She wanted to believe him, but all she saw was Blackwood's eyes in her scope, the split second he had turned as if he could feel her breathing. A man like that didn't just bleed. He adapted. And he would come for her. The tracker she had planted days ago pulsed faint signals back through her receiver. She unfolded the map, tracing their movements. Crates were being shifted inland, deeper into the canyon's network of old mines. Blackwood wasn't leaving. He was digging in. "They're moving the weapon," she said. Mike leaned over her shoulder, brow furrowing. "Looks like north tunnels." "Easier to hide, harder to hit," Jack murmured. He tapped the map with a calloused finger. "Which means we go in after it." Katherine froze. "Go in." Jack's eyes met hers. "We can't stop him from outside anymore. You clipped him, Harper. He'll bury himself with that bomb, lock it behind walls and guns until he's ready to sell. We either wait until the world burns or we take the fight inside." Her throat tightened. She was a sniper, a shadow. She killed from distance, unseen, untouchable. Close quarters wasn't her world, it wasn't her strength. But the river didn't care about her strengths. The river demanded blood. Mike grinned, savage and eager. "Hell, I've been waiting for a good cave fight." Katherine turned away, pressing her hands against the cold wood of the wall. She wanted to say no, to argue, to remind them she wasn't built for rushing tunnels and trading bullets in the dark. But then she remembered the diver dragging that rusted shell from the current. water spilling off its sides like tears. If she said no, the river would hand the world to Blackwood. She closed her eyes, exhaling slow. Then we go in. They left before dawn, packs heavy, weapons clean, silence binding them tighter than trust ever could. The canyon walls loomed like stone sentinels, the air thick with anticipation. Katherine walked point, rifle slung but ready, every step precise. Jack followed, carrying a suppressed carbine. Mike brought up the rear, his presence like a storm waiting to break. They moved toward the tunnels where the trackers pulsed, toward the place where Blackwood bled but still breathed. Katherine's chest burned with one truth. The river had kept its secret for 50 years, but tonight it would demand payment. And she didn't know if she'd be the one left standing when it was done. Why did the tunnels feel like graves before a single shot was fired? The canyon's silence fell away behind them as Katherine, Jack, and Mike slipped into the mouth of the old mine. The air changed instantly. Cold, damp, heavy. The kind of air that clung to lungs and whispered of things buried for too long. Their headlamps carved thin beams into the dark, painting rusted tracks, rotten timber supports, and the slick sheen of moisture dripping from stone. Katherine's rifle felt awkward on her shoulder here. The tunnels were too tight for distance, too jagged for clean lines of sight. She kept her Glock ready instead, two hands steady though her palms were damp with sweat. Every step echoed, her boots crunching on gravel like bones. Jack led, slow and deliberate, carbine raised. Mike followed close behind, shotgun balanced casually but ready to thunder. Katherine kept her place in the middle, her heart hammering louder than their footsteps. Her mind whispered a truth she hated. She wasn't built for this. She was a river ghost, a sniper who breathed in silence and distance. Here in the close dark she felt exposed, human. "Stay sharp," Jack murmured, voice barely above a breath. "Sound carries." "Already hearing too much," Mike muttered, but even his usual bravado was hushed. They moved deeper. The tunnels branched, collapsed, twisted. Markers glowed faintly on the walls, fresh chalk, arrows pointing deeper in. Blackwood's men had already carved their trail. Katherine ran her hand across one. The chalk was still powdery, fresh. They weren't far behind. Her throat tightened. They were walking into the wolf's den. The first body came 20 minutes in. A guard slumped against a support beam, throat slit clean, weapon still across his lap. His eyes were open, glazed in death, staring into nothing. Mike crouched, inspecting. Silent kill, one of theirs, discipline's breaking. Jack's jaw tightened. No, it's control. Blackwood doesn't waste bullets if he doesn't have to. He wants silence down here. Katherine's stomach churned. She had seen death before, through scopes, through distance. But here in the dark, close enough to smell the iron in the air, it felt different, more intimate, more final. She forced her hands to steady. Don't break now. The tunnels widened into a chamber, water dripping into a shallow pool at the center. Old mining carts rusted along the edges. Fresh equipment lay scattered, ropes, sonar, crates marked with Cyrillic stencils. And voices. Katherine froze, her breath shallow. Shadows shifted at the far end of the chamber. Armed men, 3 at least, their headlamps bobbing as they checked gear. Jack signaled. Katherine nodded, dropping low behind a cart. Mike slid into darkness opposite her. The men were close, too close. Her Glock felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She had never killed like this. No scope, no distance, just a breath, a trigger, and eyes staring back at her. One of the men turned, beam sweeping dangerously near her position. Jack moved first. A soft cough of suppressed fire dropped the man before his light could land on her. Another spun, rifle rising. Katherine's hand moved before her mind did. She fired. The round punched through the man's chest, the shock throwing him back against stone. The third shouted, fumbling for cover, but Mike's shotgun roared, echoing like thunder in the cavern. The blast flung the man sideways, silence following in its wake. Catherine's chest heaved. Her Glock trembled in her hands. The image of the man she shot, his surprise, the way his knees buckled, burned behind her eyes. "You all right?" Jack asked, low, steady. She forced a nod, yes. But the lie tasted like ash. They pressed deeper, following faint echoes of movement. The air grew heavier, dust clogging their throats, each step sinking them further into the river's underworld. Finally, they reached it. The chamber was vast, carved wider than the others, its ceiling disappearing into black. Floodlights blazed, generators humming, casting long shadows across the scene. And at the center, raised on metal braces above the stone floor, sat the weapon. It was smaller than Katherine expected. A rusted cylinder, scarred with age, paint flacking from its shell. Yet the sight of it made her skin crawl. The device was old but not dead. Men surrounded it, armed and alert. And there, arm in a sling but posture still commanding, stood Marcus Blackwood. Catherine's breath caught. Even wounded, even bandaged, he radiated control. He barked orders, his voice carrying across the chamber. Men obeyed instantly. He was bleeding but not broken. And she wanted nothing more than to finish what she started. Her rifle slid from her shoulder, scope rising. Even in the cavern's chaos, she found him, her crosshairs centered on his chest. Her finger curled, and Jack's hand pressed against her barrel, pushing it down. "Not yet," he whispered. Her teeth clenched. "If I don't." "You fire now, we die in this chamber," Jack cut in, eyes sharp. "Look around." She did. Guards everywhere, rifles ready, numbers too high. One shot would mean nothing if it was the last thing she ever fired. Catherine's chest ached. Patience, always patience. But patience felt like cowardice, when vengeance was only a trigger away. They pulled back, slipping into a side tunnel before the patrols rotated. The dark swallowed them again, but Catherine's mind burned. "You should have let me take it," she hissed, voice sharp. Jack turned, his face unreadable. "And what then? You kill Blackwood, his men turn the chamber into a grave. You want your brother's ghost honored. Don't throw your life away in the dark." Her jaw trembled. "You don't get to use David's name." Jack's voice softened, just barely. "I don't have to. He's here whether you want him or not." Katherine turned away, pressing her fist against the stone wall, fighting the tremor in her hands. Mike broke the silence, voice low. "Then what's the play, Ghost?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "We don't kill him yet. We kill his plan. We make sure that bomb never leaves this canyon." Katherine closed her eyes. She wanted to believe that was enough. But deep inside, she knew nothing would feel enough until Blackwood was gone. Hours later, they crouched above the chamber again, hidden in a higher shaft. Katherine watched Blackwood, her rifle steady, her scope drinking in every detail. And something gnawed at her. He wasn't just guarding the weapon. He was preparing it. Wires snaked across its shell, tools laid out, men working with careful precision. Her blood ran cold. "He's not moving it," she whispered. "He's arming it." The words fell heavy in the air, a truth too sharp to ignore. Jack's jaw set hard. "Then we don't have days, we have hours." Mike chambered around, his grin grim. "Good, I was getting bored." Katherine swallowed, her hands tightening on her rifle. The time for patience was ending. The river was about to demand everything. Why did the air feel thinner, as if the tunnel itself knew what was about to happen? Katherine crouched on the high shaft, rifle pressed tight, scope steady. Below, the chamber throbbed with noise, generators humming, men shouting, drills hammering stone. But louder than all of it was the silence of the weapon sitting at the center, its rusted shell now wrapped in wires, its belly opened like a wound. Blackwood stood over it, arm in a sling, his face pale from blood loss but his voice still commanding. He barked orders in Russian, his men obeying without question. They weren't moving the device. They were waking it. Jack's whisper cut through the tension. "We stop this here." Mike grinned, teeth bared. Finally, Katherine swallowed, throat dry. She had dreamed of this moment, her scope finding Blackwood, her finger pulling the trigger, her brother's ghost finally avenged. But now, staring down at the chamber, she realized vengeance was only one part of the weight pressing on her chest. The other was the world. If Blackwood succeeded, cities would burn, families would vanish in white fire, and all her restraint, all her silence, all her ghosts would mean nothing. Jack's hand touched her shoulder. "Harper, you ready?" Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. "Yes." They moved as one. Jack slid down the shaft first, carbine barking in suppressed bursts. 2 guards fell before they even turned. Mike thundered behind him, shotgun roaring, his bulk a storm breaking through stone. Katherine held high ground, scope locked, every shot precise, men crumpling before alarms could sound. Chaos erupted. Shouts in Russian, boots pounding, floodlights swinging wildly. Blackwood spun, fury flashing across his pale face. "Contact, take them." Gunfire tore the chamber apart. Sparks sprayed from rock, the air filling with smoke and dust. Katherine shifted position, picking targets clean, her rifle cracking rhythm into the chaos. Each shot was an anchor, her training taking over, her fear burned into precision. But the numbers were against them. Dozens of men poured from side tunnels, weapons blazing. Mike took a round to the shoulder but kept firing, laughing through the blood. Jack moved like a ghost, every burst of fire surgical, every motion deliberate. And Blackwood didn't run. He moved toward the weapon, shouting commands, one hand dragging wires into place. His wounded arm hung limp, but his will was iron. Katherine's scope found him again, crosshairs on his chest. Perfect. Her breath slowed. "This is it. This is David. This is everything." Her finger tightened. And then she saw it. The wires, the trembling hands of a technician, the glow of a timer flickering to life. Her blood froze. If she fired now, if she killed Blackwood, the men would panic. The technician would drop the wire. The weapon would arm. It wasn't just vengeance on the line. It was millions of lives. Her chest heaved. David's ghost whispered for blood. Jack's words whispered for patience. And Katherine chose. She shifted her aim. Crosshairs slid from Blackwood's chest to the technician's hand. One breath, one squeeze. The round tore through the wire before it could lock. Sparks burst, the connection severed, the timer flickering dead. The chamber exploded in shouts, men screaming, Blackwood's voice rising above them all. "No, hold it steady, finish it." But it was too late. The chain was broken, the weapon silenced. Blackwood's eyes found her. Across the chaos, across the smoke, his gaze locked on hers. Fury, recognition, a curse spoken without words. And then he raised his pistol. The shot cracked. Katherine felt it tear past her cheek, stone shattering beside her. She dropped flat, breath sharp, rifle swinging back. This was no longer patience. This was survival. She fired. The round hit him low, tearing into his leg. He collapsed against the platform, pistol clattering away. Men rushed to drag him back, retreating into the tunnels, shouts fading as they pulled their wounded commander into darkness. And just like that, he was gone. The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of dying generators and the ragged breaths of the 3 who remained. Katherine slid down from the shaft, boots hitting stone. Her rifle hung limp at her side, her chest heaving. The weapon loomed before her, silent, rusted, broken, but still terrifying. Jack approached slowly, eyes scanning the wires, the shell, every mark. Finally, he nodded. Dead for now. Mike wiped blood from his shoulder, wincing. "Hell of a firefight. You sure you're not ghosts? Cause I swear we shouldn't be standing." Katherine didn't answer. She stood before the weapon, staring at its rusted skin. Her reflection wavered on the steel, fractured, broken. She thought of David, his letters, his grin, his ghost. "I didn't kill him," she whispered. Jack's voice was steady. "No, but you saved more than he ever dreamed." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to let go of vengeance, to let David's memory rest in the silence of the river. But ghosts never left so easily. They destroyed what they could: the wires, the braces, the tools. Then they collapsed the chamber, charges echoing through the canyon as stone buried the relic once more. A grave for a weapon that should never have been born. By dawn, they emerged into the pale light of the river. The water shimmered, innocent again, as if it hadn't just held the world's end in its depths. Katherine stood at the bank, rifle slung, eyes on the current. It whispered against stone, carrying away blood, secrets, ghosts. Jack stepped beside her, silent. Mike limped behind, muttering about whiskey and stitches. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the weight in her chest ease, not gone but shifted. Sometimes vengeance wasn't a bullet. Sometimes it was the choice not to fire. Sometimes dignity didn't speak, it simply acted. And in the silence of the river, Katherine finally understood.